Hello and a very warm welcome to all of you on Emotionally Yours with Pratik, and we're shooting this episode with Dr. Mohan Nair, who's Managing Director Episurf India. A very warm welcome to you, Dr. Mohan, and I'd be very happy to listen to you. Our viewers are going to listen to you on emotional intelligence, EQ and healthcare, and emotions and their impacts in healthcare industry. So let's begin our talk by understanding your journey so far. The other day when we spoke, you mentioned that you've been in this industry for more than 4 decades now. So we'd like to understand how has been this journey all through, starting from the basics onwards till where you are right now.
So thank you for giving me an opportunity to participate in this podcast. I've seen your earlier podcast. It is really, hitting the most important topic of today's life, that is emotion. And also thank you for inviting me to talk about healthcare. I spent only 40 years in healthcare.
Only?
Yeah. And across 3 major segments of healthcare, that is pharmaceuticals, medical device, and for the last 10, 12 years in healthcare delivery, and that is hospitals.
That's really important. I mean, you've seen all the sides, right, from pharmaceutical to surgicals and hospitals. So out of these 3 areas, which have been the most emotionally fulfilling areas in healthcare, if I may ask?
The most emotionally fulfilling time in this my 40 years career has been healthcare delivery.
Healthcare delivery.
Because in pharmaceuticals and medical device, you never have an interface with the patient.
Mm-hmm.
But when you are working in a hospital in whatever capacity, right, from a CO level to a ground level, you are interacting with patients every day. And if you ask me, there is any industry which requires the highest emotion quotient and highest emotional intelligence, it is healthcare delivery, hospitals. And I know this point has come to the main point after the COVID episodes, how emotion came to a really peak, and people took care of each other with their emotional strength, because that was a catastrophe which even medical science could not take care of it. And therefore the emotional bonding and then emotional management of that time taught us that emotional intelligence and emotional quotient, if there is any industry which requires a lot of people like you to train us and guide us, it is healthcare delivery, that is hospitals.
So when you talk about healthcare deliveries, hospitals, I'm sure we all understand that the entire atmosphere, the entire work life is very, very volatile and uncertain, because you never know what your schedule is going to be. You never know how the patients are going to react. You never know how patients' relatives were going there, what they have in mind. And the entire thing is very uncertain and complex. So what has been your experience in terms of dealing with complexities, in terms of your own experiences that you may want to share, and also in terms of certain things that you've gone through yourself?
So my experience has been very challenging, because anybody who swims against the tide is not considered good and kind.
Yeah.
And hospital industry, to tell you the frank story, they are not even looking at patient experience and patient emotional well-being. It is so engrossed in making more and more money out of surgeries and patients, that this vital element of patient experience and patient coming happy out of the hospital is totally lost. Yesterday I was interacting with a doctor. I said, you're getting the best artificial intelligence products, the robots and the 3Ds. What about emotional intelligence? Where does it play a role in your hospital? Patients are coming here, the one place where a person doesn't want to go. He may roam around for 2 hours in a mall happily, but if you tell him 10 minutes to remain in the hospital after a discharge, he wants to jump out of the hospital, and the relatives also want to jump out of the hospital. But this is where the hospitals are making a huge mistake. And I feel, people like me and you can play a very important role in, training the entire ecosystem to improve their emotional intelligence and, garner more happiness from those patients who want happiness. So this is a major point which I want to say, and I'm sure many people may not like this, but this is a fact of life that any person you ask today, gets scared of going to the hospital.
True.
A, because you don't know what is the kind of treatment you get, and B, the kind of emotional support you get from the ecosystem. And I've seen this for the last 10 years, and I was just, thinking about it, that why didn't I reverse my career, years of experience, starting with hospital and then going into medical device and pharma, because if emotional intelligence and quotient is required, it's the highest is in the hospitals.
So, Mohan, when you talk about the highest level of emotional intelligence required in the hospitals and healthcare deliveries, I'm sure in pharmaceutical as well it is as complex because, most of the medication is absolutely emotion driven. For that matter, entire healthcare business is very, very emotion focused and emotion driven, right? And, and in pharmaceutical, people who are in the front line of sales are the ones who are facing the maximum pressure because there are numbers to be met.
Yeah.
And tell us something more about these kind of situations that you might have handled in your pharmaceutical career where, the numbers had to be met, there are performance issues. You understand that the market is yet to mature for a particular product or for a particular service, but yet it's always a push top down. Yeah. And it's very difficult for the person who's frontlining, the doctors, the hospitals, etc., to make them accept what may not be required at that point of time.
Yeah, pharmaceutical industry is just like any other industry. It is number driven. So many of my bosses used to always say that you're as good as your last quarter. You may have 30 years of performance. What were you last quarter in terms of numbers? You're that. So a lot of emotional fortitude is required for people who sell pharmaceutical products. And their interface with doctors and with other paramedical people to influence the usage of their products requires a lot of emotional strength. And there are challenges when they meet those doctors and meet those paramedical people. So they are sandwiched between customers who do not take them so very seriously and their bosses who take them too seriously. So they are sandwiched between two, levels.
Difficult meat to be sandwiched.
Yeah, absolutely. So they go to a lot of emotional turmoil, and it's a tough profession to be in.
Yeah. Having been on the other side, on all sides, what's your view? I mean, whenever they're trying to sell certain things and the numbers are not being met, as you rightly said, and that is more so in pharma. Of course, more or less it is true in almost every industry, is sales is as good as your last quarter.
Yeah.
The numbers that you've met. And this is where, you find anguish, anxiety, frustration. Again, from top down, you have things which you cannot assert to. You just have to submit because it's a very, very customer-driven market.
Yeah.
And at that point of time, let us say, people are very, very stressed out. And we sell the medicines to reduce the stress, where the people who are selling those medicines are probably the most stressed
Absolutely.
out. So this is the paradox that you deal with. And how do you normally, in your company, how do you deal with such things?
So, as I said, across industries, the same scenario, and all the more in pharmaceutical, where it is number driven.
Yeah.
So the only way to tackle this, like I've gone through in my teens and advancing age, is to make yourself strong. So my father used to always tell me, a stroke of a hammer forges steel. It may break glass. So become steel. More and more people will throw flagrant abuses or, emotionally they may, do things which will not keep you stable. Okay. But you can't change them. The only one person you can change in this world
is yourself.
So you become emotionally strong, and that's where the emotional fortitude and emotional resilience, you need to work on that. And here I would like to quote a very, very lucky incident in my life, is where I got into the two best companies in my life. One is Novartis, Sandoz, and Johnson & Johnson. And yesterday when I was just browsing through some of those videos to come prepared for this podcast, I saw a very interesting video which said that Daniel Coleman's emotional quotient, the theory in 1990, which he
Right.
propagated, was very effectively used in the company where I worked, Johnson & Johnson.
Oh, fantastic.
And we did a lot of, analysis of our leadership to ensure that our emotional quotient of our leadership is very good. Because if the leader is good, jaisa engine, वैसा गाड़ी, वैसा train. So if your leader is very emotionally capable guy, he harnesses the energy of all the people through his emotion, and you drive the entire team to what the company or that team has to achieve.
Very true.
So I'm very lucky that these two companies worked on us in our transition from a first role to a bigger role to work on our emotional strength. Because intellectual strength, technical skills was already there.
Yeah.
But what we needed was something which will help us to manage a bigger team, a diverse team. And believe me, Pratik, it helped me immensely when I traveled to 90 countries across the world. Everybody has got a different culture and a different level of emotion.
Yeah.
So when you become an all-rounder, that you can handle any kind of emotion, it became very handy to handle those people who are not from my own country. Indians are very, very, tolerant. We can emotionally accept a lot of things, but that might not be the case in many countries.
Oh, yeah.
So you have to be, in sync with those emotional culture of those countries. And those trainings in Novartis and Johnson & Johnson helped me in a very big way to, build this emotional strength.
So from there, where emotional resilience is highest in Indians, you're dealing with you're with a Swedish company where emotions are not very openly displayed and it's right to the point and being extremely assertive. And when you see that there's a cultural gap, how we Indians are resilient, and it's absolutely okay if we call our bosses on our wedding or for Vastu Puja at our home, vis-a-vis a Swedish company where it's only about Figo for a while and then go back and do your work, and your own life is too private. So it's a very private kind of a society that on one hand you have, on the other hand you have a society which is like multi-ethnic, multicultural, and these cultural gaps have to be breached and mapped with. So and as you rightly said, emotions play a very, very major role in terms of integrating these aspects. So how do you go about it in your company?
Basically, as I said, these two companies taught me that, you have to study the emotions of your team and find out what is their motivational. To quote few words in Marathi, logo or Hindi, dukti nas and avarta vishay. You have to find of each and every individual. Every person has got a different motivational level. And if you have that empathy to find what is that dukti-ness and avarta vishay of that person, you can very easily harness that as an energy.
The trigger and hot button.
Yes. To motivate him to do what you can get the things out of him.
Fantastic.
So emotional strength, where I found it the most useful in leading a team, to make people aware the kind of potential that person has, and the kind of potential he has used, and show him the gap between what he has used and what he has. So, those kind of emotions make a big, big difference.
Oh, yeah.
And make you achieve. I'll tell you one very simple example. I was at crossroads in my career in Novartis.
So we spoke about the triggers and hot buttons, right? So getting the best out of the person is one aspect that you've spoken about. Let us elaborate a little more in terms of being devil's advocate and giving a candid feedback. Because at the end of the day, again, you can't always be goody-goody as a leader. You motivate a person, you work on a person, but at the same time, you expect the results out of a person. And you need to give a candid feedback. Unfortunately, the feedback mechanism in India is very, very personalized and emotionalized vis-a-vis a lot of other countries. How do you see that?
Yeah, so I think as a leader, you have to be very, very candid. If you read Jack Welch's book, Straight from the Gut, he says that a good leader is a very, very candid person. And very early in my career, we were taught about a technology or a system which is called BEER, BEER, which means first you touch the first point, that is his behavior. B stands for behavior.
Okay.
E is for effect. So tell him what his behavior is affecting. Okay. Then the next E comes, which is expectations. So what is expected out of him? And based on that expectation, what are the results you can get? That is R. So BEER, BEER. So this is exactly what you have to do when you come across a person and you want to develop a lot of things in him, and ensure that he takes your advice seriously. That's an area where you have to be very, very careful, because he'll feel that you're criticizing. Even a child today doesn't like a critique. He requires a role model. So you become a role model, you tell him that this is in your own interest, and then he comes onto your side.
So leading by example.
Leading by example, yeah.
All right. That's really interesting. So would you like to, do you recollect certain instances where you practiced this BEER and then the results were phenomenal? If you could probably elicit a couple of such incidents, those you have faced.
Yeah, this BEER incidents in my career was more out of the skills than of emotions. But one of the emotion thing which I can definitely remember is to be a good listener. So when you have a communication, and this is something which is not taught in many schools or in many professions, that a good communication is 70% you listen and 30% or 20% you hear talk. So when in my young days, youthful days, I used to speak a lot even before I understood many things about the customer. My boss sat with me and said, this is the way you should be, 70% you should listen. Because from the body language and from all the obvious language which he's speaking, you get to know many signals or triggers which can help you to navigate your sales call. So that was a very, very useful, feedback and training I got at the right time to get my communication system in place.
Excellent. It is always said that a team is as good as its weakest link and as strong as its strongest link. So very rightly put that listening and listening empathetically is really, really important. Addressing those emotions, triggers, so on and so forth. Let us talk about your overall journey when you look back, when you reflect on all these three industries that you have worked in for 4 decades. What are the most difficult emotional challenges at your level that you faced? When and how you overcame them?
I'll tell you, the latest one is the healthcare delivery industry, the hospital industry. See, when a patient gets admitted and discharged, if you look at a total knee replacement in orthopedic, I have been in that industry for quite some time. It's only about half an hour, 1 hour the doctor spends time with the patient.
Yeah.
The balance 2 days, it is an entire ecosystem. And hospitals, in order to make money, compromise on the quality of nurses, quality of the resident medical officers, and they compromise on the quality of nurses. Now what happens is that these nurses who come from a background where you have not trained them to be emotionally correct, and they are the givers of service to this patient, there is a huge gap. So if you ask me what is the bane of this hospital industry, is that they come out surgically fit, but emotionally not that fit. So if you ask me if there is any aspect of healthcare delivery industry which has to be looked very seriously, is building that training calendar for entire ecosystem to ensure that the patient experience and the relatives experience is great. And by the way, Pratik, I'll tell you this, Pratik, this also makes a lot of economic sense.
Oh yeah.
Because since I've been in marketing for a major part of my life, the best form of marketing is word of mouth. One satisfied patient can get you 4 patients.
Absolutely agree.
Now the new word of mouth is social media. But what has not changed is the principles of marketing. That is, it continues to be the word of mouth.
Yeah.
Practices have changed from the conventional to social media. Now, if one security guy, as he enters, a patient or a relative enters a hospital, behaves rudely, the entire purpose of giving that service to that patient, the whole experience, the nice experience to the patient, is lost. And I'll tell you where I got to know more about this is when I went to the US about 10 years back. And in Cleveland Clinic, where I visited, I realized that in a hospital of about 200 beds or 300 beds, they had about 50 patient experience manager.
Patient experience manager.
Now, these are people who are paramedical, so they know what is medical science, and they navigate the patient right from the security to the OR, to the X-ray room, to the OPD, and make their experience very, very smooth. Now, I have not heard of Cleveland Clinic or many of these clinics doing any other marketing, because this marketing itself is so good.
Absolutely.
One patient experiencing a very good experience, getting more and more patients, we go to this hospital, and that's how get more and more business. So it makes economic sense also. So I was very lucky to meet the patient experience manager there. And I'll tell you a very interesting thing. I don't know whether this will work in India, but look at the sensitivity of emotional, things what they've done in Cleveland Clinic. That all the parking within 1 kilometer of the hospital, some 100, 150 parking, is reserved for patients. All the doctors and paramedical people of the hospital have to park their vehicles outside this 1 kilometer. In India, if a doctor doesn't get place exactly outside his cabin for parking, he will take the entire hospital on his head. So this kind of insensitivity to patients' requirement is something which is really bugging me, and I would like to work a lot on this. Now we can't shift the economic things in hospital, because everybody is working on a shoestring budget. But having taken people, can you train them? Can you give them a lot of counseling to ensure the patient goes very happy out of the hospital? Is something what we can do. Even in big hospitals, we have found that patient often complain about everything other than the clinical things which you have done with him. So he may complain about not
getting
good
the
food, appointments, not getting good food, the right channels not being he's being able to see in the room and all that. But what is more important is, have you handled the emotional part of his journey in the hospital? And whoever does that, believe me, will be a super success in the industry. And my next few years, I would like to do that, build a lot of core competencies in improving and enhancing patient experience, so that becomes your major tool for marketing, rather than other commercial ways of marketing or transactional ways of marketing. This transformational thinking is required in healthcare delivery.
What you're talking about is more like giving them a smooth and a pleasant experience, and also putting the relationship between the patient and the hospital ahead of the economic aspects. I mean, this is very, very rare to find, as you rightly said. I still remember, when some of my family members were hospitalized, my dad and my mom, a lot of time was spent on paperwork, a lot of time was spent on going back and forth on, not the core surgical or not the core treatment related areas, but a lot of non-treatment related areas. And this talks a lot about getting that kind of an emotional connect, or the comfort that the patient is looking for. Because the patient has already come in an aggrieved state. Right? And that kind of an aggrieved state can only be addressed if you address that particular aspect, which is called emotions.
True.
All right? Wonderful. I mean, that's a wonderful insight. And the Cleveland Cleveland Clinic story that you have shared, speaks volumes about what's missing there and what needs to be really fixed in. Apart from this, when you talk about, let's go back to the first experience, medical devices experience that you've spoken about. How has been the experience in that particular industry? Pharmaceutical, we've already spoken, or healthcare delivery, we've spoken. I'm more curious to understand what's been your experience in the medical devices area.
Medical device industry was a very, very satisfying experience from the emotional perspective. I'll tell you incidents. I was handling cyclosporin which is a product used for kidney transplant. It is an immunosuppressant, which basically helps your body to accept the foreign kidney which is implanted.
Okay.
Now, this product, without this product, the patient cannot survive. So we used to have a lot of people from the eastern part of India where kidney problems are predominant because of the water and multiple other things. They undergoing this kidney transplant. And I remember about 15 years back, 10 years back, a kidney transplant would cost about 2 lakhs and the treatment cost will be another 1.5, 2 lakhs. Patients used to come crying to us that, can you subsidize the cost of cyclosporin? Now, there is a limit how much you can subsidize. Even that subsidized cost, the patients could not afford it. So one patient came to meet me in Novartis, husband and wife. The husband was to undergo a kidney transplant. And he requested me that, you should do something for me because I don't have anything. I've sold my entire farmland to get my kidney surgery done. So please help me. I was about to say something to him and I saw him missing. And when I looked down, he was at my feet, touching my feet to do something, because he said that if you don't give me treatment as a subsidized cost for the next 6 months, whatever 2.5 lakhs I've spent on a kidney transplant, even that will go away and my family will be on the roads. So that was a very, very emotional, touching experience. And that also told me that, hospitals, medical device have to find the government have to find a method and way to, do something for these really economically backward people.
True.
There is a statistics which says that there is a large number of people go below the poverty line in India because their family member, themselves or their family member, is hospitalized. Whether it is a kidney transplant, liver transplant, or a cancer patient, you can imagine how much of financial burden and therefore the emotional burden it puts on the family is tremendous. But I'll tell you a very interesting thing, which where emotion can be a very, very big game changer when it comes to patient care. When I was in Kokilabein Hospital, I saw that there are a good number of people who manage the end of life care.
End of life
care. So people who are terminally ill with cancer or somebody whom you know that you will not be surviving for a very long time. Such people, in US you have a hospice and other places where these people are rehabilitated. But in India, we don't have many things to do for them. And there, I know Dr. Priyadarshini Dev. She's a counselor, amazing counselor who talks to the patient and their relatives. More to the relatives that you have to come out of this, trauma. You have to live without this person maybe after 2 months, 3 months. You should make him stronger. You can't be emotionally weak and give a lot of emotional support. There are many such stories. But one more story which I liked in the Kokilabein Hospital is when I used to see a lot of young kids, hospitalized for a bone marrow transplant. They are 6 years, 10 years, 12 years. Very, very, very sad to see them at that young age kids going through that experience. And I appreciate, look at the way some hospitals have, looked at this to solve the emotional problem, is that there used to be a musician going into each of these wards and singing few rhymes with a guitar.
Wow.
It can be Johnny, Johnny, Yes Papa, or some, Marathi poem and all that. And the child, as a child being a child, gets out of that pain and for that few moments, he becomes, emotionally, smiling and happy. So there are multiple things which you can do to, improve the experience of a patient and ensure that he goes both physically, clinically, and also emotionally very, very strong.
Lovely.
Thank you.
I mean, this must have been the Munna Bhai moment for you. I'm sure you understand that, how to empathize and not to look at it as, subject ye feel nahi kar pa raha hai,
True.
kind of a thing. So that's really, really interesting. Now, how do you see your journey, your company's journey going further, and what are the future plans in terms of, developing these kind of skills in the people, developing these kind of aspects in the industry that you are in? That is my question 1 to you. Question 2 is, we often see that in healthcare delivery, the work-life balance goes for a big toss as long as doctors are concerned, or
Yeah.
as long as paramedics are concerned. So what's your thoughts on it? How do we deal with it?
Yeah. So tackling the first question which you just asked me is how are you going to work on the journey in your company? Believe me, again here in Novartis, we were taught that you don't have to sell the sizzler, sell the sizzle. So if you look at the treatment which Episurf is giving to the patient, we are not trying to sell an implant. We are trying to sell an experience about the joy of motion. The
Right.
patient becomes relatively handicapped because of his osteoarthritic problem or osteochondral lesion problem. The joy of motion is brought back. So directly, indirectly, what we are tapping is not only the clinical results, but the kind of emotional freedom the person gets to go for a marriage, to go to the temple, to do his favorite sports, and move around with this. So that is a kind of thing which we are trying to
Increasing the freedom of movement.
increasing the freedom. That is the kind of philosophy we are trying to sell to the patient, and it's true. We have got a lot of clinical trial reports which substantiates what I'm saying. Rather than saying that we have one more implant, one more metal to be put in your body, this is the angle which we are taking, and it is giving relatively good results. Just to share one experience, we have a 26-year-old dancer who tripped and she fractured her ankle.
Okay.
And the only way she could have got salvation from that was to fuse her ankle, which means she will not be able to move the ankle like you and me. And mind you, she's a dancer.
Oh, yeah.
If any part of the body which has to be the most mobile is the hands and legs, and
Yeah.
if you just try to constrain it, she will not be able to move. Now, this surgery brings that freedom back to her, and the joy of that patient getting back to her own self of dancing and herself dancing and teaching a large number of students is the joy you get by you selling this product or by making this product available in India. So we are looking also from the user's angle or the emotional angle of the product, and that is what we want. Having said that, I would like to quote a very, very big problem in the industry. Is that people go left, right, and center for the total knee replacement and other surgeries, and they're not focusing on the motions for which they put that implant. And that is bringing a lot of disrepute to the industry, disrepute to the hospital, and the industry as a whole is not able to grow because that unsatisfied patient who has not got restored his joy of motion will not speak good about the product.
Right.
Now, I'm not talking about any hypothetical case. I'm talking about my own mother who got operated for both her knees at the age of 84. I could see that she was little more, mobile what she was
Otherwise.
earlier. But that joy of motion, and giving that confidence can only come when the physiotherapists and all the other doctors and other people work on that joint which has been in that position for 5 years, 10 years. The muscles and so many things have to be worked around.
Right.
Unfortunately, many of the doctors are not focusing on that. They are more focusing on doing more and more total knee replacement rather than bringing the joy of motion on the patients whom we have already operated. And believe me, is there any good areas where this practice is there? I will tell you, I had been to Germany in a place called Hahn-Mundane, about 200 kilometers from Frankfurt. And I saw a very interesting thing about that doctor, treating his patients for total knee replacement. 2 days he does surgery, 2 days he does OPD. And one day, they work only 5 days. One day, he's in the physiotherapy department, looking at the mobility of each of his patient who has been operated the week before or 1 week before that.
The results.
The results on the motion, whether his quadriceps and other muscles are in sync with the new implant which is in the body. Number one. Number two, when he's having his OPD, the second day of his OPD between 4 to 5 is reserved for him to talk to the patients who have got operated the last week.
Okay.
So now here is a doctor having a video call with the patient who's got operated last week. I know my mother got operated. I'm telling you, this makes a huge impact
Oh, yeah.
on the patient. The doctor who has operated on the patient talks to the patient and asks him, "How are you? How are you feeling?"
How's it going?
Believe me, it gives a different kind of a. Even if there is a pain, the patient will say, "Oh, yeah, I'm okay now," because the psychological, impact it
Aspect.
has on the patient about his well-being is phenomenal. And this is the area I would like to work in the balance part of my career, is to bring that emotional strength and emotional sensitivity in the industry, so that it churns out more happy patients and brings in more joy of that surgery or the procedure.
So rightly said that you have to handle those emotional aspects
Yes, yeah.
of the patient and make it a worthwhile experience for everyone.
True.
And that holds the key.
Yeah.
Very well said. Now let's come to the second question of mine,
Yeah.
which is about compromising on work-life
Yeah.
balance for healthcare people who are in the line of the fire.
Yeah. Actually, if you're in healthcare, and all the more in healthcare delivery, that's a big compromise you do. There is a disturbed work-life balance when you're in hospital industry, because you can't, adjust your clock and tell them you're available only from this time to that time. But if you ask me, you can still do it. There are a lot of my doctor friends who have got a perfect work-life balance. But those are the people who have satisfied their need. And like Mahatma Gandhi says, you can satisfy anybody's need, but you cannot satisfy anybody's greed. So if the doctor brings a balance between his need and greed, he can definitely devote a lot of time for his work-life balance. Having said that, the important part is, how do you take care of the patients or the people who need medical care? And that's where your team building becomes very important. So you should have a very good team who in your absence can also manage or maintain the kind of treatment you would have given to that patient. So building a very strong team. And Dr. Pratik, tell me, how can you build a good team without your good emotional fortitude?
Connect. Absolutely.
So if you look at Mahatria says that the amount of time you invest with your employees outside your work will determine better results or more results with your employees during the work.
Wow.
Mahatria's statement. And I have followed that for many years. Like, I had 28 to 30 team members in Kokelaben Hospital, and I don't remember a single person whom I have not visited, his family. That gives you a lot of understanding about what is
The
needed,
person is
what
all
the
about.
family needs. His son needs education, his daughter needs higher education. What motivates this person? What brings fire in him? Rather than hitting him on his head and say that you have to do the number or you're fired. So there is statistics to say the COA is taken for his financial and business capability, but the highest reason why he is fired is because of his emotional incapability.
Yeah, very well said. I mean, I always say that an IQ can get you hired,
Yeah.
but an EQ can get you promoted or fired.
Absolutely.
So very well put that.
So people have not understood the potential of this. This is not, this is not something which you can take it as a time pass. It's something which should become core of your entire business. If you know how to manage people, you can manage anything in this life.
Yeah.
Anybody who comes to me, I always ask them, I tell them that it's a people problem. You keep all your problem aside and you find out what is, the people problem related to it. And I'll tell you, this is where,
emotions
have driven right from my childhood days. I would just like to, take a detour.
Sure.
Talk about my, how
Sure.
I got that emotional strength is because of my father. My father was very strong in small stories and, the Panchatantra stories and lot of aphorisms and anecdotes. And he used to tell me that, Mohan, have a principle in life that let problems come from anywhere, solutions should come from you.
Wow, that talks about having a complete solution-oriented
Absolutely.
approach.
And he used to always say that, work through people, with people, entire leadership as you go up your life, leadership in life, like you become a father, grandfather, that also is a type of leadership.
Yeah.
Parenting is a leadership, or leadership is parenting, it's synonymous. Everything you require is what people management.
Yeah.
Isn't it? So you have to focus on that. And one more thing, there are two more things which I would like to, describe what he had told us, and that became your mantra of your life. Second thing, he said that he came to know that, in the college, maybe I'm flirting with some people or spending your time. That was an 18, 19-year-old boy, so it's nothing wrong. But he told me that, do you want to surrender your likes and dislikes to your goal, or do you want to surrender your goal to your likes and dislikes? Do you want to be a 19-year-old boy doing a 19-year-old boy things, growing long hair, going to movies, flirting with girls, or you become a 19-year-old boy which the whole world looks upon?
Now that changed the entire perspective.
So then he didn't have to police me whether I'm, flirting or going with people, wrong people, because that value system, that emotional statement made on me was very, very strong. And the last one I'll tell you is that, son, you're growing young, into your teens, be very careful. Don't get into smoking and drinking. This is not brought right from Mahabharata days. People have lost their wife or playing dice.
Right.
Don't get into these habits. Nobody has grown with these habits.
Yeah.
And he told that, people who have got these habits, they will either beg for it or steal it, but they will ensure that they somehow get that thing what is, or lat lag jati hai, lat, kisi bhi tarah he will try to get it.
They become
so
addicted.
Don't get into those things. And believe me, those are the emotional statements or emotional tattoo which he has built in my brain, which has guided me through this entire experience.
Fantastic.
So it's very, very important, and that, I'm sure you will ask me this question because that is something which is very, very prevalent in today's society, is parenthood.
Yeah.
So whether we are able to spend that kind of time, what your grandfather, your father, or we as parents could spend.
I was just about to come to that because, being a parent is completely different than that. So I had a quote on this which says, don't tell your children what you used to do during their ages, because they are in a world which is no longer, you are telling them the story of an age which no longer exists.
True.
And they need to be prepared for a completely different world.
Yes.
So your take on that?
I totally agree. But there is a concern over there, okay? Is that, somebody asked, what is the difference between a dog and a human being? Especially when it comes to parenthood. And don't take the message wrong. Is that dog produce kids. Man cultivates kids.
Now that's the difference.
That's a huge difference, isn't it?
Yeah.
So if you don't have time to, cultivate your child, bring value system in your child, I think you're losing your plot on parenthood. And I'm actually not a good example because I could not spend too much time with my kids because of my 20-25 days of travel, and I feel bad about it. But I was also lucky that in a way I outsourced it to my wife, and she did a fantastic job. But parenthood is very, very important. And in today's age when both of them are working, it becomes very, very difficult to give that quality time to the kids.
True.
And second, the major point which parenthood people are facing, especially from the emotional perspective, is that there are a lot of distractions for a kid today. Especially the small silver screen has taken everybody's joy and emotion and fun and togetherness and relationship. It has gone for a toss.
Agree.
I was shocked when my Marcia, who came about a month back, was proudly saying that his daughter passed 10th exam. And he is like a farmer who's not very rich. So I asked him, what gift did you give your child? He said, I gave an Apple phone to my daughter. I said, that is the worst thing you can give your child. She's 14 years, 15 years. If there is any distraction in this world which is destroying the new and also the older generation, is that small, flashy little silver screen. You see over a dining table, you have people looking at 10 screens instead of looking at the wonderful eyes like you have.
Thank you. Thanks.
So these are the emotional disconnects, or the price we are paying on the emotional front for the high-tech things which we are trying to bring in your life. It's very good. I want my child to drive in the best cars, use the best gadgets, but not at the cost of he not recognizing or she not recognizing me that I'm his or her father.
Yeah.
Emotionally, I'm talking about. Physically, they may still recognize.
So, in fact, I have a similar philosophy where we talk about the value systems. I always say this, well, in my parenthood, the philosophy is about once you're legal, okay, you're free to do whatever you wish as long as it's not self harming and as long as it's not illegal.
True.
And you take the ownership of your own decisions. So that's absolutely okay as long as these two conditions are met. Second is if you fail doing anything like this, you'll have my unconditional support at that moment.
Yes.
But at the same time, that unconditional support is not forever.
True.
All right. And third is the ownership is yours because the problem is yours.
Yes.
As simple as that.
Yeah.
So it was fantastic talking to you on various emotional aspects. One last question
Sure.
before we end this conversation and this wonderful exchange of ideas, thoughts is what really motivates you, keeps you going, and where do you find your own drive?
Making a difference in life.
Fantastic.
See, and making a difference in life of people who deserve the most. I'll tell you, I'm saying, reporting this with a sense of, duty, but with a sense of happiness I got by doing it, is when I took care of my father from the age of 92 to 98. At that age, what he wanted was not a lot of good food and big bungalows and clothes,
Yep.
but somebody who will take care of his health needs and emotional needs. And I'm very, very lucky that last 6 years of his life I could serve him and give him something which he needed the most. And I, being in the healthcare industry, I could do that. Here again, I'm not trying to, flaunt what I did, but I moved to a place closer to the hospital where my father will require frequent trips and ensure that he is more comfortable than I am. So I had an house in Blue Ridge, Hinjewadi, and moved to a place closer to a hospital where I was a consultant, helping them in business development. And I ensured my father is comfortable, to come in and out of the hospital for the small little care he requires. Now, those are the things which makes a difference in my life. So whatever materialistic thing which you can achieve, or even in terms of designation at the age of 45, I became a director. What you now need is to use this experience of your growth through your emotional fortitude, what you got in your life, to hundreds of people who deserve it. So my next few days or months or years is going to be at two places. One is with these hospital delivery guys, educating the people that, your employees across the system should practice more emotional, things when they deal with patient. That is one thing I would like to work. Because Simon Sinek says that as you grow up the ladder, you don't work directly with the grassroots people. You work with people who work with people. So if you can influence the top leaders and the HR guys to be more, emotionally correct, that will give a better patient experience, number one. Number two, which I am working very, very, consciously is a mentorship for large number of people who get into a middle-age crisis in leadership.
Mid-career and midlife crisis.
So he has got a child in 10th and 12th standard. He doesn't know to go. He doesn't want to separate from his family. But at the same time, if he's too long in that position, he sacrifices his chance of, going up the ladder. So what do we do? That kind of mentorship, that kind of emotional support, and helping with what skills are required and make him mentally strong. Just to give you an example, somebody met me last week. He said, so my child is in 12th standard, but I know I've got a very, very bad time in my company. I can be fired anytime, but I can't leave Pune. Pune people are very fussy about moving out of Pune.
Oh, yeah.
So he said, I can't move out of Pune. I said, what happens when you're chucked out of the company? And after 3 months, 4 months, you have no choice but to go to Singapore. But for your child who's in 12th standard, next level of NEET exam, going to an international institute, will you get more money going out and making some money, or you live in the bylanes of the Sadashiv Pets and Anna Pets? So that kind of emotional, support you give, and give them that consciousness that this is your responsibility. You have to become emotionally strong. And to, summarize the story, this happened in my life very early. That I was, moving from my Novartis front level job to a managerial job. And nobody in my family has moved out of Pune for, career progression. So I was one of those culprits moving out of my united family to a different place in Chennai. That time, the kind of emotional support I required came from my boss, Mr. Rufus Dias, who's no more. And he said that, Mohan, you will become a leader in trade union as you're working as a medical representative. You'll become a leader in your family with your parents, brothers, sisters. When will you become a leader for your wife and kids? For that, you have to move this ladder. And that story I keep telling many of the people who get stuck in this midlife crisis. And that's where, this is what I want to do. Sharing my experience, sharing my knowledge, sharing my thoughts to address these two bigger challenges for the leaders in the industry and for the patient population.
Fantastic. That's a beautiful vision to have. And on that note, we end here. Thanks a lot for
Thank you.
giving these wonderful insights into healthcare deliveries, into pharmaceutical, into devices, and on parenthood, and on the future objectives of midlife and mid-career crisis, moving up the ladder. So many things that we all, and I'm sure all of our audience is going to enjoy, learn out of this. So this was Emotionally Yours with Pratik with Dr. Mohan Nair. A big, big, big thanks for coming over here. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Thank you. So as a tradition, Dr. Mohan, may I request you to sign this mug of Emotionally Yours with Pratik?
Sure.
And then in turn, I'm going to sign one of the mugs and give it to you.
Sure.
As a souvenir. Thanks a lot. We hold it.
It's my honor.
Thank you. It indeed is our pleasure. And this is a small token of a souvenir. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.